Okay, you guys, sorry about yesterday's video. It was supposed to continue on to my first skin tone layer. However, I realized when I was taking a shower that I actually had not went out and gotten the the thinner that I use specifically for the skin tone layers. I was supposed to get it last week, but I guess I forgot after work that I was supposed to do it. Usually when I get off of work, I'm too tired to really remember much of anything, so that's probably what happened. So today I went out, I just got back. It's horrible weather outside, by the way, here. It's like cold and rainy and gross. But I finally have gotten back to my dorm and I got the Gamasol. So this is what I use for the skin tone layers of my ethnic dolls. It's called Gamsol 100% pure odorless mineral spirits. So the reason why I use different thinners is because the Gamasol is a little bit of a thicker consistency, and it allows the paints, specifically for skin tones, to blend more smoothly, more evenly. I find I've tried both skin tones with the Mona Lisa and the Gamsol, and I like the Gamsol much better. So I got this like 17-ounce bottle for $10 at Michael's because I get coupons from Michael's. So if you are looking for cheap thinner or what have you or supplies, I would go to Michael's and sign up for their emails because you get coupons like every day. So it was like 50% off for me. So it was only $10 for this big bottle, which will last me quite a bit. So I'm gonna mix the paints that for the first 3 to 4 skin tone layers. For me, I'm going for my Joseph. Since he's for me, I'm specifically going for a light caramel skin tone. So I won't start off with a dark color. I'm gonna start off with a light, like you'll see. The color will be very light brown. Um, so first, I'm gonna make sure I open up my new bottle. So I just poked a hole in it. I'm gonna put a bunch in here so I don't have to keep mixing the color. I'm gonna get a lot of paint, especially for a bigger kit like Joseph. So I got a bunch of thinner in there. Put that aside. So I do not tend to use, even when I'm doing a darker doll that's more of a medium skin tone, I do not use the pre-mixed colors, the darker pre-mixed colors, because it will give your doll a very orange tint. I know a lot of my dolls still have that little bit of orange tint, and I'm trying to get better with that, but if you use just, for example, just Flesh 03 or just Flesh 02, which are the darker flesh colors, so this is Flesh 02. You can see how it looks in there. So the thing with Flesh 02 and Flesh 03, it'll give your doll, like I said, a very orange skin tone. So I never use, if I do use the flesh colors, I never use them just by themselves, just mixed solely Flesh 02. So with him, actually, what I'm going to probably use, I think I will use a mixture of Flesh 05, which is one of the lighter colors. It looks kind of like that. I will use Flesh 05. I'm going to use a little bit of Burnt Umber, which is this very dark chocolate brown that a lot of people use for the bases of their ethnic skin tones. And I use bases of my other skin tones. So I'll use a little tiny bit of Burnt Umber. I have no specific way I do skin colors, and I'm going to use a little bit of, I'm just thinking in my mind what would mix to make the color I'm thinking of. So, and then for this, I will also use, if I can find it in here, where did I put that color? Oh, I'm going to use a little bit of raw sienna, which, as you can see, is more of like a yellowy brown, mustardish, like mustard color. So I'm going to mix those together and I'll show you the color that I am going to use for at least the first 3 to 4 skin tone layers. There's going to be a lot of layers regardless of what I'm looking for. So these will be the first about 4 skin tone layers will be this mixture. Alright, so I have my skin tone mixture here that I'm going to use for the first 4 layers at least, depending on what I get to. So as you can see, it's mostly, it's kind of hard to, there you go. So as you can see, it's mostly that Flush 05 color, and then I put about half as much burnt umber in there as I did the Flush 05, and then just a little tiny bit of that raw sienna, because you don't want to put too much raw sienna in there because it'll give you too much of a yellow color. And you can counteract that with the opposite color of yellow on the color wheel, which I think the opposite of yellow is purple. The complementary color will help you counteract if your doll starts to get too yellow. And then if it's too orange, you can use blue to counteract that. A very, very thin blue wash could help you counteract some of that color. So right now I'm checking the consistency, and you want the skin tone layers, you want them what I could best describe as a milk-like consistency. So thicker than watercolors, but not so thick that it's just, you know, how the original paint is. So I think the best way to call this consistency is milk. So it's the consistency of milk. And you're going to want it that consistency because of this step, how I do it, at least. So I got a bigger brush here. This is a 3/4 inch flat brush. I'm going to mix up my paints every time I do this. I'm going to get his head. And basically, you're going to go really quick because you don't want to wait too long and all of it starts to dry, because then you won't be able to blend. First, let me dust him off. It's been sitting overnight. Make sure he's dusted off. There we go. Had a piece of hair on him. Okay, so this is why you want this consistency, because now you're just going to quickly paint with that big brush all over the face except for on the lips. I'm trying to see the best way to show you guys that I'm painting all over his head. So this is the skin tone steps. You have to move, like I said, fairly quickly, but don't like stress yourself, because Genesis heat set paints are quite forgiving with how long you can take on the steps. So I'm painting, making sure I get all his crevices, behind his ear, inside the ear, painting all over the back of the head. And paint will drip down, so just if you're not in the area, if you're in an area that you care about getting paint on, be careful, lay down some paper towels or something. I'm fairly messy with it because I have paper towels and stuff all over this desk. So I'm fairly quick and messy with it. But this is how I get my even skin tones. So I paint all over it, make sure I get, like I said, everywhere except for his lips. So I don't know if you can tell. And then I take my finger. Yeah, a little piece of hair on him. But, so he's now covered in this coat of paint. You can see he's shiny all over. That's where you can tell, again, where you've painted. And then what you do is, you get your sponge. This is a regular, just cosmetic wedge. And then you blot off the excess. This is how you will get a very even skin tone. You'll see areas where paint is pulling up, and you're just going to want to blot that off like I'm doing. I'm trying to turn it towards you, but also I need to pay attention to what I'm doing. So you're just blotting off that excess paint, and then when your brush gets too saturated, you're gonna blot off your sponge onto a paper towel or a washcloth or whatever you're using to get excess paint. This is important that you do this step to get the excess paint off. Otherwise, you are not going to get a smooth skin tone at all. So, this is a very important step that I always do. So, I think he's fairly even. And then, for the smaller areas where paint is pulling up in the creases, I take this little makeup brush, it has an angled end, and I go along the creases to stop that pulling inside the ears, the eye crease. You're going to get all that pulling out of there. Otherwise, you will have very cakey looking creases. So the first two, or basically the first three skin tone layers, you will not see much of a difference in the coloring because obviously you're doing pretty thin layers. Even though it is thicker paint than you used for other steps, it's still a relatively thin paint layer. So I'll do this, mess around, make sure I'm getting all the areas where paint would be pulling up. And this is, again, how I make sure I get an even skin tone. So I'll do lots of this for each skin tone layer. And then I'll turn his head around and keep checking if there's anywhere. So his head looks good. You see it's all wet. It looks even to me. I don't see any more areas where paint was pulling. So I'm going to set his head aside, and then I'm going to grab his leg. Well, actually, I'm going to grab his arm first and show you how I avoid the palms of his hands, and then I'll show you on the legs how I avoid the soles of his feet. So there he is. All right, so I have one of his arms here. We're going to mix up our paint, and we're, again, just going to apply that paint all over where we want it to go. So I start at the wrist and I work my way down because paint will drip. So I'm just painting down the arm. This is how I avoid getting it on his palms because I hold it this way with his hand up so it doesn't get on his palms when it drips. And then you're carefully going to get on the top of his hands. Let me see if I can bring you closer. You're going to carefully bring that paint onto the top of his hands. And tilt so it doesn't immediately go into his palm. Don't know if you're quite seeing. You can see the paint dripping down a little bit, and that is okay. Like I said, I have stuff catching the paint drips on my desk. All right. Again, we're going to take the same cosmetic wedge, and we're going to blot off the paint drips, all that excess paint. Blot off all that excess paint. Same thing, get the creases with that angled brush. Again, I got this angled makeup brush from what we call here is Family Dollar. I don't know if you guys have those where you are. It really depends on the state or country you're in. They don't have them everywhere, but it's like a dollar store, but with more stuff that's a little bit over $1, but it's still cheap stuff. So I got this set of makeup brushes, which also came with this brush and other brushes for $4 for I think like 6 brushes. So you don't have to pay a bunch of money for your brushes, and I've gotten so much use out of these brushes. So right now I'm getting the excess out of the hand creases. And so for me, I do 2 skin tone layers and then I bake. So I don't bake every skin tone layer. That would be so much baking. So I let them fully dry in between layers, and then I'll bake every 2 skin tone layers. His arm looks fine. I don't see any more really excess dripping down. You can see it's shiny. That means the whole arm is covered in paint. So I think this arm is good to set aside. I might still mess around with it if I see any other areas that I think need to be blotted, but I think this arm is actually solid and ready to be set aside. So I'll move on to the other arm, and then I'll show you guys the leg. Okay, I'm back now. I've done the other arm, and now I'm going to do the first layer on the leg. It's a very similar process, and I don't know how to explain to you guys where to tell on the feet where the line for pigmentation, like the darker skin tone, should start. For me, I just know because I look at myself and I can see where the line is, or it should be. So on him, you can kind of tell where the line should be. You see where those creases start. You're going to want the line of coloration, the line of pigment to start above that, where those creases really start to pick up for the bottom of the foot. I don't know if you see where I'm pointing. So I'll start avoiding naturally those areas, and you can see it also on this side where the skin kind of changes direction. That's where the line of pigmentation ends for the soles of his feet. So mixing up my paint. Always make sure you mix up your paints because they settle if you leave them for a little bit. Same process, we're going to paint that this color all over, avoiding the feet, the soles of the feet like I just showed you. We're going to paint that all over here, over his thighs, to get a nice consistent coat of paint on him. Now if you're doing a smaller baby, obviously you're going to want a smaller brush than this to paint on the paint, because you won't be able to get in all little areas. For him, this works quite well because he's so large that I'm able to even get in his smaller areas. So now I'm working my way up onto the top of his toes, getting this paint layer on here. And then we're going to turn his foot and follow along that line. I'm sorry if you can't see quite what I'm doing. I'm hoping I'm explaining it well enough. Following along that line. Making sure I get every spot covered in this layer of paint. And for subsequent layers, it's the same process. So I won't show you guys, I'll show you guys the second layer, but then I won't show you guys the third and fourth layer of this color because it just will get repetitive. Same thing with like the mottling, it gets repetitive. Once you get the basis of it, I don't need to keep showing you guys every single layer because it's the same process. So I'm putting more paint on just to cover all my bases, all my areas on his leg. Making sure I get that back of the foot. You do not want to forget that. I've forgotten that one time, and you could tell it was a little bit lighter. So you want to make sure every every single skin tone layer. You get the back of that foot, this area, the heel area. Alright, so now that he is covered with this layer, I'm gonna again blot it off like I did with the arm and like I did with the head. So just blotting off that excess paint. So while I'm here, I had someone ask in the comments of one of the previous tutorial videos what I thought about air dry paints. Had I tried air dry paints? I've said this several times before, but when I first started trying to make a reborn, I did try air dry paints and I absolutely hated it. And it didn't work for me because especially as a beginner artist, it's very, very difficult to use air dry paints because they dry so quickly. Genesis gives you more time to correct your mistakes or work around it. Air dry paints are very non-forgiving when it comes to beginner artists if you make a mistake, and in general, when you make a mistake in Genesis, before you bake it, you can remove that mistake without removing. If you have if you have baked layers underneath, you can remove the mistake you made on top of those without ruining the paint layers that you've already baked below. So say I made a mistake in this skin tone layer that I'm putting on now, I could remove that without removing all the veins and mottling that I did with just a little bit of paint thinner. Just a tiny bit of paint thinner will remove that off. When you are using air dry paints, if you make a mistake, you make that mistake. You've got to work around it, try to fix it, because when it's dry, you cannot remove that paint without removing all of it. So that's a big thing that I hated about air dry paints. And besides that, I couldn't, for the life of me, get the paints do what I wanted them to do. They just wouldn't stick, and I tried lots of different mediums, and I spent a lot of money trying to get different like bases for the vinyl, but just no matter what I tried, it seemed like the paint didn't really want to stick where I wanted it to stick on the vinyl. So that was another big thing with me. In fact, I was going to give up because I thought it was me. I thought I just could not paint the dolls, and I was going to give up. But I was like, let me just, while I have time this summer, try Genesis heat sets. And since then, I've been painting since May. And I haven't had really any issues with Genesis. So if you trust yourself, if you have the patience to deal with air dry, I'm sure there's people who can help you with that. I just wasn't finding a lot. And another thing is there was like 0 air dry tutorials for ethnic babies, and that's mainly what I wanted to paint. There was just none. There was absolutely no air dry tutorials for air dry paints. I found like one, but it still wasn't even the same kind of air dry paints that I was using. So there was different colors, and it was a whole thing. Different mediums. So that's my experience with air dry. I know Jen, she's one of my favorite artists. She uses air dry paints, and her work is absolutely beautiful. I'm talking about Jen at I hope I'm saying the correct name. I have so many names in my head right now. She's creative newborns on YouTube and her Instagram. She has incredible work. Her hair painting is just absolutely amazing. It looks so real. I wish I had the patience for hair painting, but for me, I actually find it so much easier to try rooting from what I've done so far. It was a much better process for me. I tried to do hair painting on a spare head. It did not work. I just don't have the patience. Because with hair painting, it's so hard to make it look realistic. So if you haven't seen her work, Creative Newborns, go check it out. She has, again, amazing work. Her dolls look so realistic. So yeah, I hope that answers the question about what I thought about air dry paints. Just not for me. I understand if you have health conditions where you cannot use Genesis, then by all means, if you want to still try Reborning, try them out for yourself, because this is just my opinion. based on my experience. So I'm pretty happy with the coat of paint on his leg, his first leg. So I'm gonna go ahead and do it on his second leg. And again, you can see all the paint covering, and where it's not on the foot, it's not shiny. I don't know, the light's quite bright. You can see it's not shiny on the foot, and it's shiny all on top of the foot, but not on the sole. So that's how it looks right now. Not much of a difference in this first layer. So I'll put his leg aside, and I'll come back with the second layer, and then that'll be it for this video. Alright, so I've showered, I've done some homework, I came back, I did the second layer on the arms and head off camera because it is it's the same process. So you can see he's shiny because I just did it. So now he's drying off from that, and then I'll bake him. And I'm using a turbo convection oven that is Walmart's Mainstay brand, but I'm looking into investing in a new wave oven soon because it is the turbo Mainstay oven is a smaller oven than the new wave. So I'm thinking about investing in a new wave oven. However, it's over, I think all of the new wave ovens are over 1200 watts, which is the limit we're supposed to be allotted in the dorms. So I'll see if I can get away with it, but I don't know. I don't know what I'll do otherwise. So I'll continue to do more layers of this color, probably 2 to 3 more layers of this color. I'll let you guys know how many more I end up doing, and then I'll take another video. I'll have another video come out when I switch colors, so you can see what he looks like at that point. But this is how he looked. This is him with 2 skin tone layers drying. You can't really tell much of a difference, and you won't tell much of a difference in skin tone until at least the 4th layer. Usually is when I see a shift in skin tone. So right now he's still very pale. So that's what he looks like. I haven't done his legs yet. I'm still waiting for his legs to dry. The thing about skin tone layers is that it does take a lot longer to dry, which is just one of those things, but you can't rush it. Otherwise, you won't get your paints cured properly if you go ahead and add on top of it when it's not completely dry. So that's just one, like I said, it's just one of those things about Genesis. One of the drawbacks is you do have to wait. So that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any questions that I have not answered in this video, please ask me them in the comments below. If I haven't already answered them, I'll be happy to answer them. I do get a little annoyed when people ask questions that I've already answered in the same video that they commented on. So just make sure you're paying attention and before you ask me any questions, because I am really busy. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video with the second part of the skin tone. Bye.